Hello, true crime fans. Welcome to Debate the News True Crime, live on Chatter Social. I'm Joseph Lobosco, joined by my amazing co host, Adrienne Barker. Tonight, we're turning to a heartbreaking active case out of Southern California, the disappearance and suspected murder of 7-month-old Emmanuel Haro. This case has shocked the Inland Empire community and raised tough questions about our child protection systems and even the role of social media in ongoing investigations.
I'm Adrienne Barker. We are live on Chatter Social, so download the app and come on in for conversation and debates. So, Joseph, in August of 2025, baby Emmanuel Haro vanished under mysterious circumstances. His mother claimed she was attacked in a parking lot and that an unknown assailant abducted her infant son. And for days, strangers and neighbors held vigils and scoured the area, hoping for a miracle. But soon the story took a darker turn.
A quick note before we dive in, this episode discusses violence against a child, including child abuse and possible homicide, with details some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know needs support, help may be available via the Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. Adrian and I are not law enforcement officers, attorneys, or forensic experts. We do our best to research each case thoroughly, but this show is recorded live with minimal editing. Any factual inaccuracies are unintentional. Any individuals, organizations, or entities mentioned who have not been convicted of a crime, including some of tonight's suspects, are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The opinions of our guests and audience members are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of myself, Adrian, or Debate the News.
So here's how we're going to proceed. First, we're going to walk through a detailed timeline of events from the day Emmanuel was reported missing to the latest developments in the legal case as of early September 2025. Then we'll debate and discuss things like the apparent failures of protective systems, the impact of community and social media response, and the challenges of prosecuting a no body homicide. And finally, we're going to wrap up with our thoughts on what lessons this case might hold for the future. This is Debate the News True Crime Edition. Let's dive into the timeline of events. Joseph is going to start us off.
Around 7:45 p.m. on Thursday, August 14th, 2025, 41-year-old Rebecca Haro called 911 to report that her 7-month-old son, Emmanuel, had been kidnapped from a parking lot in Yucaipa, California. Rebecca told San Bernardino County deputies an alarming story. She had been changing Emmanuel's diaper in the backseat of her SUV outside of a Big Five sporting goods store when she was suddenly attacked from behind. According to her account, a stranger approached saying "Hola" right before she was struck and knocked unconscious. When she awoke, baby Emmanuel was gone. In media interviews that night and the next day, a visibly distraught Rebecca, sporting a black eye, pleaded for her son's return. Emmanuel's father, Jake Arrow, also made a public plea, saying, quote, "Whoever took our son, please bring him back." Almost immediately, law enforcement treated the case with urgency. Deputies scoured the area that night with scent tracking dogs and helicopters, and neighboring agencies were notified to be on the lookout. An Amber Alert was considered, but because Rebecca couldn't provide a suspect description, authorities did not issue a formal alert. Still, the community was on high alert for any signs of the missing infant.
Within a day of the supposed abduction, investigators began noticing that Rebecca's story wasn't quite adding up. San Bernardino County Sheriff's detectives reviewed the surveillance footage from around the Yucaipa shopping center, and they found no evidence of the mysterious kidnapper. And then, as they re interviewed the parents, numerous inconsistencies in Rebecca's statements came to light. And when pressed on those details on August 16th, officials say Rebecca became uncooperative. She abruptly stopped the interview rather than explain the discrepancies. This was absolutely a red flag. By that evening, the sheriff's department publicly announced they could not rule out foul play in Emmanuel's disappearance. And that weekend, what began as a hopeful missing child search shifted into a deeper investigation. And detectives expanded their efforts, interviewing multiple individuals connected to the family. and reviewing a ton of surveillance video from both Yucaipa, where the kidnapping was reported, and Cabazon, where the Haros lived. And at this point, public worry skyrocketed. I remember this is a 7-month-old baby missing. Rumors and speculation started swirling on social media as people theorized what might have really happened.
August 17th, 2025. That Sunday, members of the community organized a candlelight vigil for baby Emmanuel. Dozens gathered with candles and prayers in Yucaipa, not far from the alleged abduction site. That same day, law enforcement made a decisive move to protect the Haros of their child. On August 17th, CPS took the 2-year-old into protective custody. As investigators dug into the family's background, Jake Haro's criminal history began to come to light. It turned out that 32-year-old Jake Mitchell Haro was no stranger to child abuse allegations. In fact, he had been arrested in 2018 for abusing an infant daughter from a previous marriage. According to court records, that baby girl had been hospitalized with multiple broken bones, a skull fracture, and a brain hemorrhage. Extremely serious injuries. Jake claimed that he accidentally dropped her on a sink during a bath, but doctors said injuries didn't match an accidental fall. Ultimately, Jake pleaded guilty to willful child cruelty in that case. The conviction was entered in 2023. However, in a decision that is now being fiercely criticized, the judge suspended Jake's prison sentence. Instead of serving up to 4 years behind bars, he served only about 180 days through a work release program and was put on probation. He also had to take court-ordered classes for child batterers, which he completed in May 2025. Riverside County's district attorney would later lambast this outcome as, quote, an outrageous error in judgment by the court. Tragically, the little girl from the 2018 case survived but suffered permanent damage. Prosecutors say she's now bedridden for life because of those injuries. So by mid-August, the public learned that Jake Haro was a convicted child abuser on probation at the time his child Emmanuel went missing. This revelation prompted a wave of anger and the haunting question, how was this man allowed to be caring for young children?
By August 20th, a week now since Emmanuel vanished, law enforcement efforts ramped up further. Detectives executed search warrants, including one to seize a car belonging to Jake Haro. Officials didn't publicly say what prompted them to tow away the family's vehicle, but it suggests that they were looking for forensic evidence. Around the same time, tips from the public started coming in, and a few people even reported possible sightings. The sheriff's department said they followed up on these report sightings, but unfortunately, none panned out. Emmanuel was still unlocated, and investigators reassured the community that they were doing everything possible. They said, we know the community is deeply concerned. We will continue to provide information to the extent it doesn't jeopardize the investigation. A department spokesperson said, emphasizing the case remained top priority. And notably, by this point, Jake Haro had retained an attorney, and he stopped speaking directly with detectives. And the sheriff's department pointed notably, if the parents choose to work with detectives, we welcome their cooperation, implying that up to then, neither parent was actively helping investigators find baby Emmanuel. And the community concern continued to swell. And that evening in Cabazon, the Harris hometown, neighbors held another vigil, and this time right outside the Harrow family home. People left flowers, stuffed animals, and messages of prayer on the doorstep. But hanging over the gathering was a sense of anger and suspicion. And attendees were, as one local said, focused on the baby boy and not the rumors. Yet by now, many were indeed looking at the parents. It was in this tense atmosphere that the case took its most dramatic turn.
Early on Friday, August 22nd, detectives showed up at the Haro residence in Cabazon. By late morning, Jake and Rebecca were in handcuffs, arrested at home on suspicion of murder. This was a stunning development just 8 days after Rebecca had first claimed a kidnapping. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department announced that evidence gathered over the past week led them to conclude the kidnapping story was fabricated. In a blunt statement, the department said, Based on the evidence, investigators determined a kidnapping in Yucaipa did not occur. It is believed Emmanuel is deceased, and the search to recover his remains is ongoing. This confirmation that baby Emmanuel was now presumed dead hit the community hard. A sense of grief mixed with outrage, especially as details suggested that the very people who begged for help had allegedly been deceiving everyone. At the time of the arrest, neither parent had been formally charged yet. These were probable cause arrests as the investigation continued. A family attorney, speaking generally, responded that the Haros were, quote, innocent until proven guilty, and that the truth would come out as the case moved forward.
By Tuesday, August 26, investigators and prosecutors had gathered enough evidence to officially charge the parents. The Riverside County District Attorney announced that Jake Mitchell Haro and Rebecca Renee Haro were each being charged with 2 felony counts. Count 1, murder with malice aforethought under California Penal Code 187, and count 2, filing a false police report, a misdemeanor under Penal County Code 148-5. In other words, authorities allege that Jake and Rebecca not only killed baby Emmanuel, but then deliberately lied to the police to cover it up with a fake kidnapping story. And that same afternoon that the Haros were brought to court in Riverside for what was expected to be their arraignment, the formal reading of charges, and this was their first appearance before a judge since the arrest. So they each had a public defender appointed. And interestingly, Joseph, because they're co-defendants, the court ensured they had separate defense attorneys to avoid any conflict of interest. The hearing was brief, less than 5 minutes, and neither parent entered a plea at that time. At the defense's request, the judge continued the arraignment to September 4th to give the attorneys more time to review the case. And in the meantime, the Haros would remain behind bars. And this is what Adrienne says, yay! The judge set bail at $1 million for each of them, a reflection of the severity of the charges, which effectively meant they stay in custody pending trial as they did not post bail. Again from Adrienne, yay! In fact, jail records indicated both Jake and Rebecca were being held without release. Jake at the Larry D. Smith Correctional Facility and Rebecca at the Robert Presley Detention Center. For now, they're separated. It was at this August 26th court date that many first saw the couple in person since their arrest. Immediate images showing Rebecca in a beautiful, pretty jail jumpsuit, I made that part up, looking visibly upset, and Jake, likewise, in matching attire, facing the reality of their accusation. Though formal pleas haven't been entered, both parents continue to deny wrongdoing. In a jailhouse interview with a local newspaper over that weekend, Rebecca insisted that she had nothing to do with harming her child. I will not give up on my baby, she said, claiming she wished she could be out there searching for him and still maintaining that he was kidnapped by someone else. She even defended her husband, Jake, describing him as a good dad who would never hurt a baby. Yeah, I'm sorry. If you saw my face, my mouth is dropped, my eyes are wide, and I am totally confused. These statements, of course, stand in stark contrast to the evidence that the prosecutors say they have. Joseph.
Yeah, I had that same reaction, Adrienne, when I heard that comment, because we quite literally know that that is not the truth. The very next day, August 27th, authorities from 2 counties held a joint press conference that provided the most extensive look at the case thus far. Flanked by San Bernardino County Sheriff Shannon Discus and Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco, Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestron spoke somberly about what investigators believe happened to baby Emmanuel. He revealed that the evidence suggests Emmanuel was the victim of ongoing abuse over time, not a one-time incident, and that the infant ultimately succumbed to those injuries. Officials are not alleging a sudden moment of rage or an accident. They are painting a picture of chronic child abuse. Prosecutors listed Emmanuel's suspected time of death as sometime between August 5th and August 14th. If true, it implies the entire kidnapping claim was not only false, but a calculated cover story, possibly made days after Emmanuel was already gone. Sheriff Discus doubled down on the falsity of the abduction narrative, telling reporters that forensically, investigators had a tremendous amount of evidence disproving the original story. Officials declined to detail all the evidence publicly since the investigation is ongoing and that likely will be revealed at trial. Sheriff Bianco of Riverside County put it bluntly, saying this crime appeared, quote, preventable in numerous ways. He and Discus expressed anger that Jake Haro was not put in prison despite his prior conviction. DA Hestron was even more outspoken. He blasted the 2023 sentencing outcome, saying that, quote, if that judge had done his job, Emmanuel would be alive today. It's a shame and an outrage, end quote. Those are extraordinarily strong words from a sitting DA, underscoring how serious the authorities view the system's failure.
I'm happy that they're understanding that. So at the same press conference on August 27th, authorities also addressed the status of the search for Emmanuel's remains. DA Hestron stated that law enforcement has a pretty strong indication of where the baby's body might be. We know about the August 22nd search along the 60 freeway. That, as a reminder, yielded nothing. So as of now, Emmanuel's remains still have not been recovered. Recovery efforts are ongoing, and according to the DA, still focused on that lead they have about a likely location. There's also an important clarification about misinformation at the press conference. Over the prior days, social media has exploded with theories, and one rumor in particular took hold online that Jake Haro had supposedly confessed to another inmate in jail, allegedly saying he killed his son and put the body in a trash bin. A reporter actually asked about this, and DA Hestrom, he debunked it. What you just said did not happen. He said, going on to caution, you get a lot of misinformation with all those keyboard warriors online. And this was a direct response to the frenzy of amateur sleuthings that had caught fire on platforms like X and Facebook. The sheriff added that some social media antics were hampering the investigation. So it's not often you hear law enforcement call out the true crime internet community doing an active case. But wow, I was surprised at how much the true crime detectives were out there claiming all kinds of crazy things.
Meanwhile, the legal process is moving forward. Both Jake and Rebecca Haro remain in custody in Riverside County on $1 million bail each. Their arraignment is scheduled for September 4th. In addition, it came to light that Jake Haro had a pending hearing related to a 2024 firearm arrest. Apparently, he was arrested last year for being a felon in possession of a gun while on probation. That hearing, originally set for September 2nd, has now been consolidated to also occur on September 4th. We will learn whether the Haros plead not guilty, and the case will start heading towards a preliminary hearing. Investigators and prosecutors will continue building their case, undoubtedly hoping to strengthen it, especially since no body cases can be challenging in court. So just a side note, a no body case is a term for when prosecutors are trying to get a conviction on a murder charge, but they don't have the evidence of the actual body to support their claims. As of September 2025, baby Emmanuel still has not been found. He would have been about 8 months old now. The community of Cabazon has transformed the sidewalk outside the Harrell home into a makeshift memorial, overflowing with candles, teddy bears, and notes expressing grief for a life stolen too soon.
You know, Joseph, I actually would like to tell our listeners to Google it. It's pretty amazing what people have left. And I just wish, like all of you, that baby Emmanuel is alive to actually see the beauty of how people are mourning him and the story and all the children that are missing. So that concludes our timeline of the key events and revelations in this ongoing case. So disturbing. As we've seen, it evolved rapidly from like what you think was kidnapping to the parents making a call and asking for the child to be returned. But let's move into our discussion. I would love to hear from my beautiful friend and talented friend Momo.
Thanks so much, Adrienne. Thank you, Joseph, for bringing this edition of True Crime because I have been following baby Emmanuel's story when it first dropped in the local news of Los Angeles that Saturday. I was at my mother in law's house and the title was Missing Baby. And as both of us watched the interview and we listened to this mother's story, something didn't sit right. What the mother said that was so triggery, I think, for me was she said, I don't remember what happened. Someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, Hola. And as I was getting my son's diapers and things on the bottom of the truck floor, I don't remember what happened, but he hit me. I fell to the ground and I saw white. It's like if you don't remember what happened, you're just out, you know? So I was like, this woman is systematically sharing this story. She said when she awoke, she checked the perimeter. I think when we speak in normal language that isn't rehearsed in stories that are actually real and happening to us, we wouldn't say, oh, I checked the perimeter. No, I looked around. I went in the store, everything. I couldn't find my baby. So there was so many red flags from just the first instance of when we saw this on the television. And like there was all of this like almost a hyperventilating, but there were no actual tears that were coming out of the parents' eyes. And again, it was so sus the way that the Harrow parents, Jake in particular, was like, "Oh, if you have him, just make sure you're taking care of him, that you feed him and you change your diaper." There was a certain emotional distance that I could imagine if this were my baby and how different I would react. So I have to say that any mother watching that as the news was revealed on local news on Friday and Saturday knew and was so sad and shocked. They knew that baby Emmanuel probably, and I hate to say it, was deceased. Furthermore, this was not the first time that the Harrows had an incident at the top five. Big Five Sporting Good. They actually came in about 5 days before, and they said that their car was broken into at that parking lot. And they went inside and they asked the cashier if they had any cameras. They were staking the place. They were staking the place just to see if it was on CCTV. And I will go back to that interview because in the interview, the mother, Miss Harrow, said, there were no cameras. The Big Five didn't have any cameras. And so there was no photograph evidence of this happening. And that, again, was another red flag.
I was just going to say that I am really happy that these bizarro murderers that will do things to a family member and especially their child are stupid and they don't think twice to look. Like, it is crazy to me and so incredibly stupid that someone would even think that they could get away with a crime, but I think that's the case, right? I think that's exactly what happens. They're not normal human beings that have like any sense of empathy. So, we'd like to discuss some of the broader issues this case raises because there are really many tough questions here about the criminal justice system. So, my first question is this: it's about the father, Jake Haro, the convicted child abuser who avoided prison time after the judge suspended his sentence in 2023. The Riverside County's DA argued that if Jake had been behind bars, this tragedy could have been prevented. My question to you, my chatter friends, do you agree with the Riverside County DA that this tragedy could have been prevented if Jake Harrow did prison time?
Thank you, Adrian, and hi, everyone. Yeah, totally agree with that statement. The thing is that if he would have gone to jail, baby Emmanuel was probably would have never been born because I think that happened before he was conceived. Yeah. So baby Emmanuel would have never been in the picture and would have never been suffer with this. So my thing with that is, yes, he would have gone to jail, but at the same time, I feel like this baby has a different mission. Like there's a reason why he was born, and it was to catch his father. It was to catch this man that has done this not just to him, but to his previous son.
Wow, let me just say, wow, 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 wow. You come out the gate like literally like a horse. You come out of the gate like just like speeding, going. But if he was still in jail, they wouldn't even have been able to make the baby. Because I'm like, I didn't even think about that, Mariana. Like, you are so right. You are so right. Debbie, take it away.
Yeah, so I agree that he should have never been let out based on what he did to that first child, his daughter, who is now completely bedridden for the rest of her life. He shouldn't have even been let out of jail, in my opinion. And also, there's also a toddler involved in this that he has this toddler. What abuses that child suffered, and this poor baby. I mean, my heart just breaks for the family that, the other loved ones that are involved that love this baby. And just yeah, he should have never been let out, I'm sorry. Anybody that commits a crime against a child should just stay in jail and rot there, just saying.
Yeah, I agree. I think in this case, if he had been in jail, I think this wouldn't have happened. But you bring up a good point. Would they have even been able to have a baby if he was in jail at the time? I didn't even think about that. But I do think it's very difficult in these situations because I definitely have a ton of respect for someone who is in a position as a judge. It's not an easy job, and making those decisions is extremely difficult. I think the average person would struggle to be able to make those decisions on a daily basis. And I also think that there's other layers to it. A lot of times, these judges have huge stacks of cases that they have to get through and make decisions on. And sometimes maybe they don't have all the time or the resources that one would ideally want before making these types of decisions. So I think it's multi-layered. I don't want to just dump all the blame on that judge. But yes, ultimately, I think he should have remained in jail for sure.
So I am really glad that after the 2023 arrest and the probation violation, they did intervene, and the Child Protective Services removed Emmanuel and the other siblings from his home. So that's interesting. Both children were placed in a non-relative foster care arrangement initially, which is standard protocol in California for imminent risk cases under the Child Welfare Services system. This ensures immediate safety while investigations proceed. And there are no reports of any other family members, but they removed another child from Emmanuel's home. So, Joseph, do you know anything about that child?
Yes, yeah. There was a 2-year-old sibling who was removed from the home. So a couple days after he was reported missing, investigators started going through the family history and they started seeing this conviction and these red flags. And they felt at that point that for the benefit of the child, just as a precaution, they wanted to take the child into protective custody.
These children, this has got to be the toughest thing. One thing I have to say with Joseph and I is that, we're delivering what we know, and we study and look at things, and obviously we have disclaimers. We're not attorneys, but we also are not out there saying things that we don't know. Okay. And when I went to go look at some of like these true crime sleuths, I was like, what the heck? A lot of you guys, I'm going to talk to you straight out now. This is to anyone who's listening that's a true crime fan. Hey, we love our true crime family, but we really have to be careful, because what happens is it's almost like too much reporting. And then I think that if it ever gets to the point where we're making the job difficult for the detectives who are trying to get to the bottom of it, I could see where these certain true crimes really are a problem, especially, Joseph, when you've got the mother claiming a hoax and that she was attacked. And what did she do? How did she get a black eye, Joseph? Do we know what she did to herself before she contacted the police to say that he was kidnapped?
So as far as I know, we do not know. This case was new to me. I kept seeing it in the headlines, and then when I saw the parents got arrested, I was like, okay, let's cover it because everyone's talking about this case. I have not done a full hardcore deep dive on it. I've just gotten a lot of the basic information. So in short, no, I don't know. But that is interesting because they're saying that this was a hoax, which would mean that that black eye, either someone else gave that to her and she blamed it on this fake kidnapper, or she took it a step further and actually intentionally inflicted those injuries on herself, or had someone else inflict those injuries on her solely for the purpose of this hoax. But, we don't know for sure right now.
I wanted to touch on what Joseph was saying about the black eye, the mom. They were saying that she is probably being abused by her husband, and she's not truly saying everything that's going on behind the scenes. So that's one thing, right? That could be true, it may not be true. The other thing that was very interesting is when they are pleading for the child to be back home, there was no tears from neither one of them, neither the dad or the mom. And the flyer that they created, it says missing kid versus saying missing baby. That was one red flag for me. The other thing is they kept talking about him in past tense. He was this and he was that. Like he was not alive anymore. I think they are hiding the truth and definitely guilty in my eyes.
The final thing that was the nail in the coffin for me for the Harrows being guilty, of course, innocent until proven guilty, allegedly. If I were a parent and the police were coming to me as if I was a suspect, if I was an innocent parent, I would be so livid. I would say, "What are you doing? You guys get out there and find the person who took my baby." Am I right? But these parents, they did not cooperate with taking a lie detector test. And that would be the first thing I would do to prove my innocence and to get the police focused on who the real kidnappers were. But you see, Rebecca and Jake, they knew that their baby was gone. They knew that there was no suspect to be caught. And that's why there wasn't the sense of urgency to cooperate with the police, because they knew that the more they were saying, the more they were incriminating themselves. Now, when the family had their computers and things confiscated, I did hear in the local news that they believed that the family reported to have not seen the baby like 30 days before prior. So, no other outside family members reported seeing that baby for over 30 days. And that after they confiscated the phones and the computers, they suspected that the baby had been gone for over 7 days from the day that they acted out this incident and made up this story.
Another thing that I read about was there was at least one charity organization who initially got involved when they officially announced that it was a kidnapping and it was still being investigated as such. There was at least one major charity that really aided their resources and their platforms to try to help this family. And they had to formally distance themselves and withdraw from this investigation after it started to come out that maybe this wasn't making sense. So I'm not even going to mention the name of that charity. I don't even want them to have to be associated with this case anymore. But that's another layer to it. When you make a false claim of a kidnapping like this, it has a ripple effect and it affects a lot of other people, other organizations who could be dedicating their time and their resources to finding children who are actually missing that then have to waste their time on stuff like this.
I just wanted to say a little something, give a background about what this community is like. This is a desert Californian community about 2 hours out of Los Angeles. And in this community, what I've heard is that the neighbors and residents in that area were so concerned. And a few days after this happened, one of Jake's past Walmart coworkers said that 1000% she believed that they needed to go after Jake because of his previous behaviors when it came to children endangerment. And going back to why is it that they felt like the police would believe them? And I'll tell you why. It's because in 2018, he got away with that story of dropping his 10-week-old daughter at the sink. And it's a systematic problem within the justice community that we don't honor the rights of these poor children that are humans who can't speak for themselves. And so, in what ways are we going to change that? I mean, you guys brought up that great point that the DA suggested a different sentence and the judge actually went against what the DA wanted. And so I feel like there needs to be systematic changes. There needs to be follow up with child protective services in ways where it's not flippant or they give up or they're like, oh, this person's not home. We'll just try back again later. Or we're not going to go into the home and do an actual check because it's my lunchtime. There's a casual essence about this. And I think if people really heightened the sense of urgency within the department and the people working for those organizations, that some systematic changes should be made, especially after this case.
I kinda wanna echo what Mama was just saying because, like, this this part of the story hits close to home for me, and I came from the system, so I'm a little, amped up about this because the system completely failed this child. They absolutely should have investigated it more, especially after there was already an open case. My God, this poor child. I have seen it with my own eyes, not just with this case, but in real life circumstances. I have seen it where the DCF worker just either doesn't care or they're in a rush because they want to go home or the case gets filed on to somebody else, or they just don't pay attention, or they brushed off because it's not important. Oh well, he already answered for that, or this is already a done deal. No, I have seen it too many times where our DCF system just hands these kids back to their abusers, and then they end up in this situation where they end up dead. So it has to start within the system. Like the DCF workers, I'm not here to bash them. They're flawed, they're imperfect. We have awesome workers and we have some crappy workers. And I don't really know the details of that previous case with this child, but to me, it sounds like this child was failed and this child could have been protected more. And our DCF workers got to step it up. That's all I'm going to say. Heather, I just want to say, and I've not been in your shoes at all or to understand from that eye's view, but I have served as secretary for 6 years with the Children's Advocacy Center in Kissimmee with the executive director, and then as guardian ad litem here and in my community. I wonder when I go to bed at night and I close my eyes and I think, what are some of the most incredible things that could ever happen? It would be that maybe the DCF agencies that are funded by the state and federal budgets, maybe they go private. Maybe that more money could be spent a little different and also prioritizing the services like foster care investigations. I think advocacy centers in every community is so important so that the children does not have to be taken around. They can, do everything in like one location. And I think that raising the pay, and I know that is something that would be really tough, but that is a big difference too, because I see exactly what you're saying, Heather, and nobody's gonna say that that's not true. You're 100% right. Um, but they also are overworked, right? There's so much burnout, they're overworked. One person just on the case that I am on has had like 6 to 8 different people. Like, it is so easy for things to change, and I'm a volunteer, guardian ad litem. I'm a volunteer, I'm not paid. The paid staff is very minimal. They don't have a lot of things. So, with high turnover, the retention challenges, a DCF worker earns approximately maybe 50 to $65,000 annually. I mean, that is not a lot of money. About 55,000 in California. It's below market rates. I just want to say that because when it comes time to really look at our services, I do think things have to be changed, and I do wonder if it goes into a private system, if that would make a difference because it's weird to me, and I know it's weird to you guys too that child welfare isn't a high priority. Our children not only need to be seen as high priority, we need to take care of them. They're going through such challenges right now. And I feel bad for all the students that have to go back to school and be nervous about just what's been in the news. So, inflation, cost of living, that outpaces the DCF wage adjustments, whether it's increasing taxes, federal grants, states grants, private pay, private fundraisers, all of that. I think that we do have to look at something like that. Joseph, this is a sad case. If there's any other questions that you have, anything else that you were thinking you want to talk about?
So, the last question I was going to pose, and not to be a downer, but The one question I was going to ask everyone is, in the wake of baby Emmanuel's disappearance, many are asking how we can prevent something like this from happening again. But personally, do you think any effective changes will actually be made as a result of this case? Because I think we hear about stuff like this a lot, and sometimes we do see positive changes, but a lot of the time we just kind of move on.
I'm gonna say no. Oh, Heather, okay, no, thank you. I'm like, oh no, if nobody says anything, then that's even scarier than an answer of no. I don't think any of us have a fortune. What do they call it? The fortune glass. But I also think that if you do see something, say something, even if you're not comfortable, you just feel like something is awkward. Teachers are mandatory. I'm a mandatory reporter. I think that's so important to just remember that, because I know it's a weird, I don't want to say anything. What if I'm wrong? I mean, yeah, we could go through that a million times, but is it better to be wrong, or is it better to lose a child? Like, what does it really look like? Because at one point, you just gotta, like, put on your big boy pants and say, "You know what? I think that there's something serious going on."
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that positive changes will come out of this. And I have no doubt that there are definitely changes that could be made that would contribute to different outcomes. But I'm kind of with Heather on this one.
Joseph, I recall when I first moved to Celebration from Connecticut, and there was a story a year before Kaylee Anthony went missing. There was a young boy that was missing, and they never found him, and eventually his mom shot herself in the grandmother's closet. They're pretty sure that she was the one that did it, but it didn't stop me when Kaylee went missing to say, "What can I do?" And in my mind, what I knew I could do is I could do 5,000 postcards, I could create wristbands, I could do stickers, like, I could do some of those things to just raise awareness, and I didn't stop. I did it. So my heart goes out to those that continue to do what is right until you find out that, there's negligence and whatever is happening behind the scenes. But I don't want anyone to stop doing something good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we have to move forward with grace in our heart and love in our heart. Does that make sense, you guys?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I have no doubt that there are a lot of good people really pushing for change and putting in a lot of effort. And I agree. No one should ever stop doing that. I'm just speaking on ultimately an effective change being implemented. I don't know if I'm that confident in that happening.
And I want to just say our thoughts go out to Jake's ex-wife, Isabel Gonzalez, who herself saw a restraining order on August 19th for her son, Eli, indicating protective efforts within the family to make sure that their children are safe. So, is it that time now, Joseph?
It is that time, Adrian. All right. So thank you everyone for joining us. I know this is really tough to speak about. This is a 7-month-old child who's missing and they believe is dead. I mean, it's tough. It's tough to talk about this kind of stuff, but I think it's important to, when a case like this comes up, to talk about it. So the 7-month-old is still missing, and the evidence points to prolonged abuse and a fake kidnapping. Baby Emmanuel's case is a horrible tragedy, but a potentially preventable one. And we hope to see justice and accountability as this case moves through the court system.
And as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, if you suspect abuse, please do not look the other way. They are used to the calls where people are not sure. Just pick up the phone and call and express your concern. Call 1-800 for a child. Let me just give you the numbers. 1-800 422 4453 or 1-800 the number 4 the letter A, child. Thank you for listening to Debate the News True Crime. If this episode was valuable, subscribe, leave us a review. 5 stars is always nice. Your support helps us keep these conversations sharp and fact driven. We'll be back with another case soon. Until then, stay safe and curious. But let me just say thank you to, and ready for this? Thank you to Mariana. Thank you to Debbie Upper. Because she is not a doubter, let me tell you. Thank you to Heather for speaking up. Thank you to Momo for speaking up. We really appreciate it. And I think though we have a nice crew in the room, we really appreciate it. If you are thinking of joining Chatter, then you should, because I'm not sure why you are not here to be part of the conversation. So please like and share. Oh, I know what I was going to say, Joseph. Wow, thank you all. The downloads are strong. Joseph, do you remember the number?
So, Debate the News True Crime is trending on the Apple podcast charts in the true crime category, not in the United States, not in the UK, not in Canada, but in India and in Russia. We are actually on the charts and have been for a couple days. So, very interesting. We have some fans from all over the world. So, we love that. If you're from Russia or India and you're listening, thank you. We appreciate the support. Um, yeah, so it's very, very exciting. And we've had such a positive feedback. We have such an amazing group of people that show up every single time we do our show. We would not be able to do this without you guys. So, yeah, I'm very, very happy with what we put together over these last couple months, Adrienne.
Yes, thank you, Joseph. This is great and really lots of love to all of you.